And I think for me, it was about um, believing in God, but not actually pursuing a relationship with God. Well, I say it like this. I found drugs and alcohol at an early age of 13.
Wow.
My addictions didn't ruin my life in a single moment, but they slowly robbed me of all of my dreams, my goals, and my ambitions.
Were you able to keep your drug addiction separate from exposure to your kids or not?
No, no. And he said this, he said, I know you believe in God, but do you have a relationship with him? I think there was a realization that my relationship with Christ is the most important relationship I'm ever going to have. And that other things aren't going to work if I don't have that relationship.
I want you to take just a minute and think about all your relationships. Do you have a mother and a father? Is that relationship good or is it complicated? What about brothers, sisters, cousins, aunts, and uncles? What about friends? What about your best friend? Do you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, or wife? How's that relationship going? What about coaches, teachers, and employers? You see, relationships play a crucial role in our lives and they shape our experiences. They influence our emotions and give us a sense of belonging. Or they can lead to feelings of isolation, self-doubt, and emotional turmoil. What about God? Is it possible to have a relationship with Him? And if so, wouldn't this be the most important relationship of all? If so, shouldn't I be pursuing this relationship first and with all my heart? Can this relationship with God influence and even shape all my other relationships? These are topics that I want to discuss with my guest today as he shares his life change story with us. I'm Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. Today, my guest is zooming in all the way from Virginia. He has an incredible story to share, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So, hey, new friend, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, finding freedom from anger, anxiety, and relational issues. And my name is John.
Hey, John, thank you so much for agreeing to be on my podcast. I cannot wait to hear your story myself. Do you notice any dysfunctions in your family growing up that maybe you didn't recognize as a child or know that they were dysfunctions? So was there any hurt going on as a child for you growing up with your parents?
Well, and I talk about this often, Eric, and that I learned a lot of great, valuable lessons from my dad. But I also learned some traits that I carried on later in life that I found out were very detrimental to my relationships. One of them was the domineering presence he had over my mom. And I carried that into my relationships because I thought that's the way things were supposed to go. And only to realize that how harmful that was to my relationships and not having that. So I think if there was one thing that really stands out, I think that was one of the big things that I learned later in life were hurting me more than it was helping me.
Yeah. So you mentioned in your introduction that you struggle with anger. Are you talking a little bit about that? Did you witness some anger with your dad? Did you witness some of that?
No, I think that's something that I kind of brought on myself. I think that's out of a lot of frustration and disappointments that I've had in my life. So that's something that I dealt with. My dad was more of a quiet, strong type, kind of quiet person who had a lot of hurt from his childhood, and his parents. His dad never really accepted him or loved him, and so it was something that he fought with his whole life.
Yeah. Would you consider yourself close to your dad? Did you guys go fishing? Did you guys spend time together, or were you guys separate most of the time?
Oh no, absolutely. Growing up, again, I come from three boys, and I learned early in life that my life was about sports, football in particular. Dad coached, and I began playing when I was like 4 years old. So sports and that connection with my father lasted throughout our life. And I even remember being in high school and with my friends, and my friends would say, man, I'm so jealous of your relationship with your parents. Because my dad was the guy that was at every football game, was at every practice, was always engaged in our lives. And for a lot of my friends, they never had that. So there was a lot of great things that my dad did. It was just some of those behavioral things that I carried with me that I didn't really notice until later in life.
Did you
Yeah.
witness any kind of substance abuse or anything like that pre-high school, like when you were in your household? I mean, did you notice any family members that had struggled with that or not?
Well, I say it like this. I found drugs and alcohol at an early age of 13.
Wow.
First smoking pot to be cool, but soon turning on to a full-on addiction. In high school, my identity was sports, but secretly my life was all about getting high.
So
So
where did you first get introduced to that?
so early on, my family moved out to Salt Lake City, Utah. And then at age 9, around 9, we wanted to move back to West Virginia to go to the school where my dad went and all that stuff. So at the start of junior high at age 13, we moved back to West Virginia. And I started going to junior high there in West Virginia, and that's where I was introduced. It was a completely different lifestyle from Salt Lake City, Utah, to Berkeley Springs, West Virginia.
Yeah. So did you it was in your group of friends? Did you start
Yeah,
doing that to be accepted or because,
yeah.
someone
It was about being accepted, being cool, hanging out with the older kids. I think that's really, that was kind of the alcohol and the smoking pot was about trying to connect with the older kids, right? And so for me, it was just that was my way in.
Yeah. Was there much faith in your family growing up? Did you guys go to church very often or did you see
No,
any
there
prayer?
wasn't.
No?
No, there really wasn't. And we my older brother actually was the first one that was baptized, and then my mom after that, and it was several years until my dad and myself were baptized later on. But it was my older brother who and again, we grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. So the Latter-day Saints are very prominent out there. And all the activities and everything was through the church, not necessarily through the community or through the school. So if you wanted to get involved in anything, it was through the church, and it was a natural draw for us. And not only that, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, when we moved out to Salt Lake City, Utah, we didn't have a lot. And so the church, the LDS church, were the first ones to step up and say, hey, we're going to help you with some food. And by the way, we got this big warehouse with a bunch of furniture in it. Won't you come over and get the stuff that you need? And, for an 8-year-old kid that's my first exposure to church and religion and people of faith. It was overwhelming for us.
But you probably didn't see much of the prayer or that kind of thing in your home at the dinner
No,
table or anything. Okay.
no,
Okay. All right.
not at all.
So, I mean, when you're a teenager, I mean, you've got some kind of idea of what you believe about God. So, did the LDS, did the Mormons teach you all that you knew about God? I mean, what did you believe about God? So, let's say when you moved back to Virginia, if someone said, "Hey, what do you believe about God?" Did you believe there was a God? Were you an atheist or what? Tell me a little bit
I,
about
I, I think for me, growing up as a boy and learning that stuff, I did get involved in the church and was eventually baptized in LDS church. And I think for me, it was about um, believing in God, but not actually pursuing a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so for me, there was a lot of things that was really going on during that time in the high school when all that was going on, because I think this is important to mention is my family was very poor and my parents struggled raising 3 boys. And so, me being the middle son, I never really got the name brand clothes or any of that stuff. I mostly got the hand me downs or the occasional thrift store shopping spree. I had to share a yearbook with my older brother, and I only had a Letterman's jacket because my girlfriend bought it for me. And so, when I think about these things, I would go out with my friends on the weekends cruising around, and we had one little store in the town, and we'd stop at the store and buy some sodas and snacks and stuff. And I would have to pay for mine with food stamps,
Yeah.
and but that's all my parents had, you
Yeah.
know. And so for me, uh, I, I was really like looking at myself the way the world looks at me, and not the way that God looks at me. And so there was a lack of self-worth that started early on in life for me,
Yeah.
that I was gifted in athletics, and I was able to make up for those things and be the star player and get the scholarship and all those things. But I was socially awkward because this anxiety. I always felt like I wasn't good enough for my friends. I never really measured up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So whenever you were in high school, so you moved back to West Virginia. It sounds to me like you were a pretty good athlete, and that you got involved in that, and that was something that you could kind of excel in. Did you start? Would you consider yourself? I mean, now you know what an addict is. You said you started smoking marijuana. You started doing some of those things. Was it something that you did really regularly, or would you say that was more of a social temptation, more of a thing because your friends were doing it and so you just did it with them, or did it become an addiction very quickly?
I think for me, it started as a social experiment, but it became an addiction very quickly for me, and it was something that I battled for a long time in my life. It was a stronger pull for me than most people,
Wow.
right? Like it was a I can't function without. This is what levels me out. That kind of mentality. You know what I mean? So and for me, it was tough. It was
Yeah.
really tough.
So if you could nail down your biggest struggle in adolescence, growing up there, in junior high, high school, before you got out of high school, what was your biggest struggle? What was the thing that you struggled with the most?
Drugs, drugs. Yeah,
Okay.
marijuana in particular.
Okay.
I could never seem to get away from it. But it's a trap. It's a trap that you fall in, and that I fell in, and it was just like I couldn't fight my way out. And for me, I think there was this idea that no matter what I try, no matter how hard I try, things aren't working out for me. I keep finding myself back in the same spot, and I would have these moments where I felt like things were going along pretty good, but then I would crash and find myself back. And um, I talked about it, that I got a scholarship to go on to play football, and went there and went through registration, went through all the beginnings and everything, and got down to the point, and they ran out of money, as it was explained to me, and that I would have to try to sign some kind of note or something to stay at school, and ended up dropping out of college right there. The first, and for me, that's one of my life's biggest regrets, but I was so unprepared. My parents were so unprepared because none of them had been to college, and we just weren't. I wasn't prepared for what. I mean, I was at college to play football, not to study, right? And so it was a little tough for me. So once I left there, there was a whole period in my life, the next 10 years or so, where I was just lost. I was just living in the world, partying, running and gunning, having fun. There was nothing really holding me, and for me, it was about, like you said, escaping the realities of my life, right? No real career path, no real relationships, no strong relationships, and that's one of the things that during this period that I had this realization. I'm looking around and I'm seeing all my friends and all my, you know, people that I graduated with and stuff. They're getting married and they're having kids, and here I am just doing the same thing that I did, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Like, what is this really what it's about? And so there was this feeling of life is passing me by, and you know, I explain it like this, and this is really what it really came down to. And I say my addictions didn't ruin my life in a single moment, but they slowly robbed me of all of my dreams, my goals, and my ambitions. I wasn't living life. I was just merely existing.
So, did you have any close relationships? Did you date any? And as you got into out of high school, college, did you have a long-term girlfriend or no?
No, I pretty much played the field until I was about 30 years old. And I started, seeing all my friends, and I would go visit my friends, and they were having kids and nothing. So I was approaching 30 years old, and I was single, and but I did meet a girl, and we both were partiers and drinkers, and we had mutual friends. So I convinced myself that I was in love. And I remember, saying to her, "Man, I want to have some kids." And she said, "Well, we got to get married first." And so that's what we did. And it was for all the wrong reasons. But for me, two of the greatest blessings came out of that marriage, and that's my two boys. But it was tough. It was our life was about partying, and as we tried to go as a family and stuff, uh, she was a full blown alcoholic, and I was a full blown drug addict. We were trying to just really survive in this world, and we couldn't. We were married for 13 years, and it ended in a pretty bad divorce. And it was not too long after my father passed away, and it was just a difficult time in my life. And I was searching and searching, trying to, I she left and she moved to North Carolina, and I was still here in Virginia. And there came a point in our relationship where I said, I'm going to give everything up here and move to North Carolina and try to fix our relationship. And what I realized was that it was beyond repair, and that she did not want to change. And I was looking for a change in my life. And so I came back to Virginia. And that's when I really started seeking change in my life, and seeking a new way in my life. And that's where I met Sabrina, my current wife, who introduced me to a relationship with Christ.
Were you able to keep your drug addiction separate from exposure to your kids or not?
No, no, no. I tell this story, and I'm not really proud of it, but it's the truth. I remember getting ready to go on vacation with my family for a week to the beach, and Friday night trying to hook up and score my drugs so we could leave Saturday morning for the beach. But when it didn't come through, and I made my family stay home on Saturday until I could get my drugs and then go to the beach, I think my kids got it. That was the time that they really saw. I think I think they saw how much control the drugs had over me. That was the difference.
So, did you ever get have any trouble with the law? Did you ever get caught with the drugs or anything, or no?
I had a couple of minor incidents, nothing major with the law or anything. I had a situation with an employer where I failed a drug test. That was very embarrassing, and I had to go through all of that. So for the most part, I think I was escaped there without any true big consequences legally or any of that stuff. So
Okay.
thankful for that.
So it sounded to me like the drugs was so important, that more important than family, than and you came here, and then you were about to mention your current wife, that you met her. So
Yeah,
tell me that story. How did you run into her? I mean, how did you meet her?
yeah. So, for me, it was tough because the truth is, when I got back to Virginia, I didn't take the time to really heal from my broken relationship. I just tried to bury it all and jump right into the next relationship. Um, my life is all about relationships. My struggle is relationships. And so my self worth is wrapped up in relationships. I use the relationships to validate who I am. And so that's been tough for me that I project that on others, you know. But when I came back, I reached out to Sabrina, and she was leery. She knew that I had been back and forth, but she knew I was a good man, and she could see my heart. And she was the first person to actually encourage me to reach out to God for healing.
So you knew Sabrina from your past?
So in Virginia, we're all part of the motorcycle group here, and I met Sabrina, my current wife, through the local hog chapter. She was part of the local hog chapter, so I knew her through that briefly, not a lot. I didn't know her that well. She was part of. There's 400 or 500 people in the chapter, but that's where we met. For me, when I came back, I was really searching, man. I was trying to find my way, really trying to get my life back under, get my legs back up under me. And I wasn't really looking for a relationship and that type of stuff. But Sabrina was really, really like the one to really get out and say, hey, you need to lean into a relationship with God. That's where you'll find some healing. And so that was tough. I went to church with her. I decided that I would go, check it out and just, kind of appease her. It really is what it was about. But I met a pastor there, Pastor Chris, who really invested his time with me and really took the time to help me understand. And he asked me one of the most profound questions that I've ever heard in my life. And this really was a turning point for me. And he said this. He said, I know you believe in God, but do you have a relationship with him? And man, I was floored. I was blown away. And so, he challenged me to read the Gospel of John. And so I did. I went home. Sabrina was all on board, man, trying to help me. This is going to help you. Whether we have a relationship or not, I want you to find yourself in this process. And so she was really helping me out. And as I read the Gospel of John, I was introduced to a relationship with Christ. And so Pastor Chris asked me to meet him for coffee at Starbucks, right? The old, hey, just meet me for coffee. And man, I had my walls up. I mean, I would not let him in, but he was very persistent, and he said, hey man, no matter what, man, no, don't worry about it. Let's just meet for coffee. And he really was someone that could reach me. You know what I mean? Like he was someone that found that that connection. And I remember, I think it was no, I know it was 2009, sitting at a Starbucks in Dumfries, Virginia, saying the prayer and giving my life to Christ right there in a Dumfries, in the Dumfries Starbucks, and I never expected it, never thought it would happen, but what I always remember about it was when I opened my eyes, that there was 20 or 30 people standing in the Starbucks clapping for me. It
Oh,
was amazing, man. That was the really cool part. I think the hard part was um, that things were changing, but not everything changed, and it was still a process. And things weren't perfect. It was a lifelong of struggle and sin that I had to overcome. But I was so excited about a new chapter in my life. But I had always tried to do this on my own. And the more and more I read God's word or started getting into God's word, I understood that I couldn't do this on my own. That no matter how much I tried, I was going to end up in that same spot each time. And so for me, it was about the surrender process, right? This is where I have to start surrendering my life and all the things in my life. And I think that's where things really started to change for me. But there was a lot of growth that went in that time period where we were at Image Church with Pastor Chris. And for me, it was at this time though that I was able to finally stop self-medicating with the marijuana, which was big for me. So 2009 is my sobriety date, and I think for me, the more I realized, the more I learned about Jesus and who he is, the harder it got for me because the more I learned about who I am. And so it was a process that I had to go through, and there was a lot for me to break down all these things that I were taught from a kid. You pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You plan your own destiny. All those things that were ingrained in me from my parent, from my dad, now were working against me. And so I had to learn what surrender was and really understand that. And so I'm thankful to say that about a year after this process, a year, 12, 14 months, Sabrina and I did get married after that. And it's been a struggle because I brought a lot of baggage into our relationship. We will celebrate 15 years of marriage in June this coming year. So I'm excited about that. We're hopefully going to get a cruise out of it or something. But for us, she was divorced. I'm divorced, and it's tough because I didn't know that God could use our mess for his messages. Two people from failed marriages could find redemption together in Jesus Christ. And I think that's something that we've worked really hard on, and God has really worked through us to help each other heal um, from our hurt marriages and the things that we've gone into. But, I talk about it, through the process when I went through my first Celebrate Recovery step study, making amends to my children, through that process was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I mean, it was absolutely terrifying for me to have to do that, but the reward in the process was just something that I could never even explain. Um, when I sat my kids down and I said, "Hey, I want to apologize for some of the things that I've done in my life and the things that and to have both of them say, 'Dad, you are a much better dad now than you've ever been.'"
Yeah.
It's just such a reward. So I'm very thankful that they've been very forgiving to me and allowed me to work through my process and never stop loving me in the process too.
Tell me how you got into Celebrate Recovery. How did you get into what were the events that led you into that recovery ministry?
As I said, things were changing, but not everything changed, and so not long after that, my wife and I moved and we started attending another church, New Hope Church in Lorton, Virginia. And that's where we learned that they had a Celebrate Recovery program there, a Celebrate Recovery ministry. But as we were going and stuff, um, my wife and I had been married for some time, a couple years, 3 years at this point, and things were going along pretty good. But I was bringing some of that old baggage back into my relationship, that from my first marriage, and the way I was treating her and stuff, some of that anger and stuff. She didn't like it, and it was just downright hurtful in the way I was treating her. And it got to the point where um, just 3 years into our marriage, I was making the same mistakes that I made in my first marriage, Only now I was making them at an accelerated pace. And it went downhill very quickly until one day my wife told me that she couldn't be treated this way anymore. And she asked me to move out. She thought that a separation would be the best thing for us. And so for me, I immediately went to this place of feeling like a failure, and man, here I am again. And you know, I, and we talked about it. I'm addicted to relationships, good or bad, and my fear of being alone was more than I could bear, right? And so I tried every means possible to change her mind or convince her that we'll do better or whatever. But I think when she asked me to move out, this was truly my rock bottom right here. I had I had found a relationship with Christ. I thought I was on the right track, but here I am falling back into the same spot once again. Two failed marriages. Now what am I going to do? But here's the thing, because I was plugged in to Celebrate Recovery, showing up every week, when things kind of hit the fan there, I had a lot of brothers that kept me plugged in. So because of my growing relationship with Christ and my Celebrate Recovery brothers and the lessons that I was learning in the ministry, I knew that I had to keep going. I knew that I had to believe that God could fix this. And so for me, it was just about showing up and allowing God to speak into my life day after day after day. And I say it like this in my testimony: my pain was finally stronger than my fear. And it really was. I was at my rock bottom. I had enough. And now it's time to make a change. And so not long after Sabrina and I separated, I began my first step study. And I knew that this was a make or break time for me. I knew I was putting it all on the line. And, I love, principle 2 says, earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that he has the power to help me recover. It was finally a time for me to realize that I couldn't do this on my own, that I had to lean into Jesus if I were going to make any changes, any lasting changes, right? I think I was good at polishing things up, but I never was really good at making the long-term changes. So there were times when I felt like I can't do this, man. I'm just going to give up. I'm going to check out. I'll take off. My sponsors, my stepbrothers, and everybody will never see me anymore. I can just, take off, man. But I'm so thankful that I had guys in my life that wouldn't let me do that. You know what I mean? And so for me, that's really what it's about. It's that brotherhood. It's that community. It's about picking each other up when we're struggling.
So were there turning points for you during that step study, and what were they?
Yeah, there was, and I remember we were having some kind of event at church, and Sabrina came, and we were going to go to this event together, and we were again separated. We were in the car, and we were talking about how's it going, how's step study going, and everything. And I was all excited. I really feel like I'm getting into myself and finding myself. And I made the comment to her that, and it was an offhanded comment of whether it works out with you or you and I or not, I'm okay with that because I got to get my life together. And she was devastated by that. For a split second, it was a period where I think there was a realization that my relationship with Christ is the most important relationship I'm ever going to have, and that other things aren't going to work if I don't have that relationship. And so for me, it was tough to have that conversation with myself, to understand that I needed to make the change, and this was how it's going to happen.
Amen, brother. I tell a lot of guys, and I struggle, again, my struggles, pornography and sexual addiction. And I tell the guys, man, what do I do about my marriage? I'm like, the very best thing you can do for your marriage is work your recovery. You get
Amen, brother.
you get your life with Jesus Christ right, and everything else falls into place.
Yep. And you know, that was the great thing about the whole step study, was I really took the time to find myself and dig deep. What you know, like I was using the drugs and the alcohol to medicate, you know, those symptoms. But let's get in there and get to the root of the problems. And you know, I was able to find some of those insecurities in my life, and reverting back to my childhood, and when I felt inferior to everybody, and how I've carried that with me throughout my life. But more importantly, you know, God taught me something as simple as I'm sorry, and and how to make amends, and how to have a conversation. I was good at not following up on things. Not, you know, hey, my wife would say, hey, we need to talk about that, and I'll be like, yeah, we'll get to that, but we'll never get to it when I was in charge. I just completed a step study not too long ago, and one of the things was, I wanted to make amends to my high school football coach that I haven't talked to in 40 years. Okay, I haven't been to a high school game since I graduated, and so through the step study, part of the process was I was going to go to a game. Well, I was going to wear my old Letterman's jacket and go to a game, and I was going to make amends to my coach because I haven't had that opportunity to do that, and I was able to go to the game. I was able to reach out to the coach's wife and say, hey, I would love the opportunity to talk to him because there's a lot of things that I would like to say. And she wrote back and said, he doesn't want to talk to you. And so I had to swallow my pride and realize this ain't about me getting forgiveness. And so I wrote the letter and I sent it. And it doesn't matter if he reads it or not, right? That's what it's about the men's process. It's about taking that guilt and shame off of our back, right? And not carrying that around. And so for me, I was able to let that go. And I pray someday that I see him, that I get the opportunity to say some things that I would like to say. But if I don't, I'm okay with that because I got to say it in a letter.
Yeah, that's really good, John. Thank you for sharing that, brother.
Yeah. You know, when people think about testimonies in recovery, there's an instant draw to drugs and alcohol. But I want people to understand that my story is about relationships, that life is not all about me. I've learned that the most important relationship is in my life is with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That all my relationships work better when I stay in his word and believe in his promises and talk to him daily through prayer. But here's the most important part. I must always remember that I am who God says I am, not who the world says I am. And so this world will beat us down if we let it. But when we remember whose we are, we remember who we are. And I think that's the most important part. I am a child of God.
John, thanks so much for sharing your life change story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and you are longing for a relationship with the God of this universe, maybe you have had a relationship with him before, but you have left it for something else. I believe this is the most important relationship a person can have, and I want to encourage you to pursue it. This relationship will change your life and give you lasting peace and purpose, just like it did for John. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time.
No matter what you struggle with, man, if you're honest with yourself, everyone struggles with something. We all struggle with something. And so it's about being honest and you know, even though our issue might not be exactly the same, we can lean into each other and be a community together and work through our issues. And so that for me has been really big, is to have that network, that support. It's really, really important. I want you to see that my victory is in Jesus Christ. That you have to believe in the process. You have to plug into the power of Jesus Christ. And you have to keep showing up, even when it's hard. You can't do this on your own. I've tried, and it didn't work out.